And then I just would like you to speak more about your son's influence and how he was a catalyst for you guys to open your eyes and to kind of get this movement started.
Thank you. When my son graduated from college, he came to me and he said that, Dad, I really need to take time, because he said, I do not understand this world. I don't know where to put my energy that would be effective. In college, he created his own major, a combination of psychology and environmental studies, because he couldn't figure out why people weren't doing anything about the environment given the information that was there. So he wanted to throw the psychology in, and it started to reveal things to him. So he said, I need to take the time to find out where I can best put my energy to try to make a difference. So he did, and quite quickly started following the money. And he's a great researcher, and he's one of those people that just was born with absolute integrity, and no one has ever budged it. He wasn't someone you could buy off with an ice cream cone to get him to never, ever. So he just kept going for, what's really going on here? Who's in charge? How did they get it? And what are they doing? Are they doing with it? So he started coming to me and saying, Dad, before you finish this movie, I think there's a few things you need to look at here. And I knew certain amounts of it that I had learned from other people, but he started handing me DVDs and giving me books to read. And we would have a lot of late night discussions, just talking this stuff through. And it was mostly trading information about money and conspiracy. When we got to the Liberty one, that was the most challenging one of all, because frankly, I grew up in a Republican area in Ohio, and then I was a 3-decade progressive Democrat in California. And then my son started showing me that entire system is based on violence. And I was desperate protecting my worldview and all the things I'd done, and all that kind of stuff. And so we would argue late into the night, month after month. And I realized that I was the one on shaky ground ethically. And so I started opening up to, if mandatory taxation is actually theft, then the whole government thing that we've all been trained to depend on is a scam. And no wonder it's been the most violent concept in history. But what's the alternative? What are we going to do without Daddy to take care of us? And so I started doing the reading and literally spent 3 years just immersed in a whole group of new teachers who have not only outlined what the problem is, but have really envisioned what would a world be like with rulers, but with rules, but without rulers. And it turns out that when you have real voluntary association, not the crony capitalism, state intervention capitalism that we have now, you start having free markets that actually are based on honest money, voluntary exchange, and then you can have dispute resolution organizations that are tied together with insurance companies, where basically your security, your justice system, and even your insurance ends up being based on having a track record of respect and protection of human rights, rather than just having a whole bunch of money and political power in order to make something happen. So it was actually really thrilling for me. Just to say, it was just it was the third great discovery for me in my life. The first one was Aikido, when I realized I could align with this fundamental pattern and have basically boundless power as long as I didn't violate anyone or the force. The second one was free energy, when I realized exactly the same thing. As long as you don't try to crush it or explode it or whatever, if you dance with this fundamental pattern, it will pour out abundant, clean, safe energy. And then the third one was this liberty one, where if we honor the Taurus, the sacred Taurus that each one of us is, and don't aggregate powers to somebody with a uniform and a gun, just actually honor everyone and then have to work it out without violating that, then it sets the human spirit and creativity free in a way that was beyond my wildest dreams. So it's a challenging conversation to have, because it takes a lot of education to feel safe enough to even get into the conversation, but it gives me tremendous hope for humanity, and that's why I'm willing to speak about it, even if people misunderstand, thinking if I'm not in their box, if I'm not in the progressive box, I must be a radical right-winger. On the right wing, they always say, you all these New Age guys, these lefties in your film, I'm not going to. Pretty soon what's happening is people are elevating in their families, in their workplaces and so forth, to a conversation based on what's really going on, what's integrity and what's real freedom, instead of, you know, do you wear a red shirt or a blue shirt, and my worldview is right and yours isn't.
Thank you. I just have one more question.
I just want to speak one more thing to that, because I think it reveals some of the behind the scenes, what was some of the most interesting and what took so long for us actually in doing this is that Foster's research style had been for a long time to expose himself to people who disagreed on every issue. So you should see, like, the mail delivery person doesn't know what to make of us, you know, because we get the foreign affairs and the nation, and we get, oh, you know, so we look at Fox News and Democracy Now! We look at every perspective that we can on a different issue, so that we're forced to do the critical thinking ourselves to see, well, what do we think is true? And so if you look at the political affiliations of the people in the movie, they are all over the board. And they're having a hard time with that because they're not used to being in movies with each other. But our purpose was to say, you know, we learned this from this person, and that was really valuable. And hey, we learned this from this person over here, and that was valuable. And so we noticed in ourselves that it transcended that. So that was one of the things that we just had to say, that was the truth of our learning. And the other thing was to really take the best of something, and if it wasn't complete, that didn't mean that it was useless. It meant it wasn't complete. And for me, that was the case with the liberty perspective. Most of the scholars and most of the brilliant thinking that's been done on liberty has not addressed the transition from where we are now to there. And to talk about voluntary associations and no government, no taxation, no involuntary taxation, is questionable if you're well, wait a minute, you know, how do we get from here? There are a lot of people who have been seriously disenfranchised by this current system, and if you talk about no taxation, our compassion has been measured by how much tax we'll pay to help people. And so it was like, that was where the whole stages thing evolved, you know, that stage one is really takes the best of that, taking care of people, recognizing you don't just get to withdraw it because it's ultimately not where we need to be. Whereas stage two, when you free it up, and also by having the beacon of light of non-violation, it means instead of adding new taxes now, you cut down the Pentagon, you get rid of the Federal Reserve, you free up the trillions of dollars. You don't need to add new taxes, you don't need a new violation in order to do what would normally be considered a progressive, compassionate thing to do by tending to care for the people. So anyway, in terms of our learning, we just had to keep going, you know, because these liberty conversations were like, oh, I don't know, you know, that one was really hard for me because I have always been dealing with the people most in need. And I didn't understand how we were going to get there. And so we just had, that was where the stages. And I don't know of any people in liberty who are really up for who have spoken to the stages. That's something that I invite us all to do, to figure out how do we hold that beacon and get from here to there without causing more violation on the way. So, but in terms of our research and our process, that was probably the most challenging thing that we went through, and it really took years of unpacking.